These are the financial records of a man who earned an estimated $8 million at the peak of his fame and was, at one point, the highest paid live performer in the world. He died in 2017 with an estate initially valued at around $150,000. And this is the story of how that happened, told through the numbers, the court filings, and Cassidy's own words. The making of a teen idol. New York City, April 12, 1950. David Bruce Cassidy was born to actor Jack Cassidy and actress Evelyn Ward, a marriage that ended while he was still a young child. His father later married actress Shirley Jones, and that second marriage ended up shaping the rest of David's career because in 1970, Cassidy landed the role of Keith Partridge on ABC's The Partridge Family, playing the son of a character his real-life stepmother portrayed on screen. The show ran 4 seasons, from September 1970 to March 1974, and out of the entire cast, only Cassidy and Jones actually sang on the recordings. I Think I Love You hit #1 on the Billboard chart in November 1970 and went on to become one of the best-selling singles of that era. What came next is hard to overstate. By his early 20s, Cassidy's fan club had reportedly grown larger than Elvis Presley's and the Beatles combined, and 2 crowds of 56,000 each packed the Houston Astrodome for him in 1972. Madison Square Garden sold out in a single day. 33,000 fans filled the Melbourne Cricket Ground. By the standards of the industry at the time, he was the highest-paid solo touring act in the world. Then came May 1974, when a concert at White City Stadium in London turned into chaos. A stampede injured roughly 800 fans, and a 14-year-old girl named Bernadette Whelan died days later from her injuries. That tragedy shook Cassidy badly, and around the same time, with The Partridge Family wrapping up, he stepped back from touring altogether. The money machine, and who controlled it. This is where the financial story really starts, because the structure of those early contracts would echo through the rest of Cassidy's life. $600 a week. That's what The Partridge Family paid him when he signed on, before he'd even reached legal age, and the studio behind the show, Screen Gems, owned the rights to his name, his voice, and his likeness. His manager eventually pushed his salary higher, but the merchandising terms stayed locked in, largely out of his hands. Cassidy later estimated that Partridge Family merchandise, the lunchboxes, posters, records, and magazines, generated something close to $500 million. His own cut, by his account, landed somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000. He put it bluntly, looking back, "I would have $80 million instead of $8 million now." That $8 million figure is the number most consistently tied to his total earnings from the Partridge Family years, combining concert fees that started at $8,000 a show and climbed to $50,000 record royalties and his television salary. It made him, for a brief stretch, one of the wealthiest young performers on the planet. But it was still only a fraction of what the franchise actually pulled in, and the gap between those two numbers would eventually land him in court. The tax problem nobody talked about. The $50,000 per show figure sounds enormous for the early 1970s, and it was, but the arithmetic of what Cassidy actually kept from each concert is grimmer than the headline number suggests. Management in that era routinely took between 15% and 20% off the top. Booking agents claimed another 10%. Production costs, security arrangements that had to scale with the size of the crowds, travel for an entourage, and the legal and accounting fees that came with that level of income ate further into the remainder. What was left sat on top of a federal tax structure that is almost unrecognizable by modern standards. The nominal top marginal federal income tax rate in the United States in 1973 was 70%, but that ceiling applied to investment income. A separate provision in the Tax Reform Act of 1969, the maximum tax on earned income, capped the rate on wages, salaries, and performance fees at 50% from 1972 through 1981. Since Cassidy's money came from performing, that 50% cap is the more accurate figure for his situation. California, where Cassidy was based, added its own state income tax on top of that. A performer earning at the level Cassidy was earning during his peak years could realistically retain somewhere between 25 and 35 cents of each dollar before any of his own spending entered the picture. The $500 million merchandise empire run by Screen Gems looks even more damaging when you account for the fact that Cassidy's small cut of it came to him in taxable income, while the studio's ownership of the underlying rights was a long-term asset compounding in value year after year. If stories like this, fortunes made and then quietly lost behind the scenes of Hollywood, are the kind of thing you find yourself thinking about after the video ends, that's exactly what this channel is built around. Hit subscribe now so the next one finds you. The first collapse. Roughly a decade after the show ended, by the mid-1980s, Cassidy said he was broke. His debt sat around $800,000, with barely $1,000 left to his name. Speaking to The Telegraph in 2008, he laid it out plainly. "I was one of the wealthiest young male entertainers in the world then, but 10 years later, I had nothing to show for it. By the 1980s, I was broke and had to rebuild my life." And that's the first appearance of a pattern that would define the rest of Cassidy's life. Real money coming in, real money disappearing, and then a comeback to rebuild it. He clawed his way back through musical theatre in the 1980s, including a run in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat on Broadway, and later through Las Vegas, where he starred in EFX at the MGM Grand from 1996 to 1998 and got credit for reviving the show's fortunes. How Las Vegas? The MGM Grand's EFX production is worth a closer look because it illustrates the specific financial logic of a Las Vegas residency versus touring, and why the two feel similar from the outside while operating very differently underneath. When Cassidy took over the show in November 1996, replacing Michael Crawford, who had anchored the production since its opening in March 1995, before a hip injury forced him out in August 1996, the show had been underperforming relative to the hotel's expectations. Cassidy's version ran through 1998 and was credited with stabilizing the show's commercial performance during that stretch. Residency contracts in that era typically guaranteed a base performance fee paid directly by the hotel, with the hotel absorbing production costs rather than deducting them from the performer's share. The upside was predictability, a dependable monthly income without the logistical and financial exposure of a touring operation. The trade-off was the ceiling. A sold-out national tour in peak years could generate multiples of what a residency paid, and the residency model locked a performer into one location and one deal. For Cassidy in the mid-1990s, rebuilding after his first financial collapse, the structure made sense. It provided stability. What it did not provide was the kind of capital accumulation that might have cushioned what came 15 years later. His 2001 album, Then and Now, went platinum. A memoir followed, then a short-lived ABC Family series alongside his half-brothers. And in 2011, he competed on The Celebrity Apprentice, where he became the first contestant fired that season after his team's fundraising effort fell short. So by the early 2000s, Cassidy had rebuilt his finances more than once, at least on paper. But underneath those comebacks, the same pressures that had wrecked him in the 1980s were building again. And this time, they wouldn't let go. 3 marriages, 3 DUIs, and a foreclosure. Cassidy married 3 times, first to actress Kay Lenz from 1977 to 1983, then to horse breeder Meryl Tanz from 1984 to 1988, and finally to songwriter Sue Shifrin, whom he married in 1991. 2 children came out of those years, daughter Katie, born in 1986 from a relationship outside his marriages, and son Beau, born in 1991 with Shifrin. Each divorce carried its own financial cost, and the third one, with Shifrin filing in February 2014 and the divorce finalized in April 2016, landed right in the middle of his worst financial stretch yet. During that same period, 3 separate DUI arrests piled on top of everything else. In Florida in November 2010, in New York in August 2013, and in California in January 2014, where his blood alcohol level measured 0.19%. He'd already gone public with his alcoholism back in 2008, after a stay at the Betty Ford Center. But the drinking never really stopped. Each arrest brought fines, mandatory rehab, suspended licenses, probation, and legal bills that kept stacking on top of a budget that was already stretched thin. His real estate was falling apart at the same time. In 2010, the bank holding his Fort Lauderdale penthouse condo started foreclosure proceedings, claiming he owed more than $916,000, and Cassidy fought it for roughly 2 years before finally handing over the keys in July 2012, reportedly to keep a formal foreclosure off his record. The bigger loss was his primary home, a waterfront property on Ocean Drive in Fort Lauderdale that he'd bought around 2001 for about $1.1 million, and then poured another $1 million into renovating. He listed it near $4.5 million, dropped the price to $3.5 million, and still couldn't find a buyer. By September 2015, the house was gone, but by that point it wasn't his to sell on his own terms anymore. His father's shadow. There is one thread in Cassidy's biography that almost always gets underweighted when the financial story gets told, and it runs straight through the middle of it. His father, Jack Cassidy, was a successful stage and television actor who struggled for years with what was later characterized as bipolar disorder, compounded by alcoholism. In December 1976, when David Cassidy was 26 years old and already pulling back from his peak, Jack Cassidy died in a fire at his West Hollywood apartment. He was 49. David Cassidy spoke in multiple interviews across the following decades about watching his father's decline and about how much of that pattern frightened him. He also acknowledged, particularly in the later years of his life, that the fear had not prevented him from repeating parts of it. The alcoholism, the financial cycles of accumulation and collapse, the difficulty sustaining the stability that fame had briefly suggested was possible, those patterns ran in both directions through the family. His half-brother Sean Cassidy, who had his own teen idol moment in the late 1970s, has spoken about the emotional weight the family carried, and David himself framed his own drinking in the 2018 A&E documentary footage, less as a failure of willpower and more as a decades-long attempt to manage feelings he had never fully processed. "I did it to myself to cover up the sadness and the emptiness," he said, and the sadness he was describing had roots that went back well before the bankruptcy filing or the DUI arrests. Bankruptcy. February 2015. David Cassidy filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in federal court in South Florida, and in his own words at the time, "I am going through bankruptcy proceedings at the moment. This is necessary for practical reasons to reorganize my life as I go through divorce and to restructure my finances." Court documents, later obtained by outlets including E! News, filled in the details. A personal line of credit from Wells Fargo ran close to $292,000. Nearly $22,000 was owed to American Express, just over $17,000 to Citi, and legal fees alone included a single bill topping $102,000. Around the time of the filing, his monthly expenses reportedly hit $27,000 against monthly income of about $12,000, and at one point during the proceedings, he had roughly $400 sitting in the bank. His assets told a more complicated story than broke alone suggests. The Fort Lauderdale mansion, still in his name, was valued around $3 million, and he also held 2 lots in the Bahamas worth roughly $387,000 each. Reports from the filing put his combined assets and debts as high as $10 million, though that figure reflects the broad range disclosed on the bankruptcy paperwork rather than one precise total, and other reporting placed his actual debts closer to $2.1 million against assets near $3.7 million. Whichever number lands closest to the truth, the bottom line stayed the same. A man who'd once earned millions was now asking a court for protection from his creditors. There's one more thread here worth following because it loops straight back to where this story began. In 2011, Cassidy sued Sony Pictures over those old Partridge Family contracts, the ones that paid him a few $1,000s while the franchise made hundreds of millions. A judge ruled in 2012 that the case had to go to arbitration instead of a jury trial, and in January 2015, weeks before he filed for bankruptcy, an arbitrator finally issued a ruling awarding Cassidy $157,964. More than 4 decades after signing that contract, the payout barely made a dent in what he now owed. That September, the mansion sold at a court-approved bankruptcy auction for approximately $2 million. The final years. By February 2017, Cassidy told People magazine he'd been diagnosed with dementia, pointing to a family history that included his mother, and he announced his retirement from touring. A handful of performances followed into March, and then in November 2017, he was hospitalized with liver and kidney failure. He died on November 21, 2017, at the age of 67. His daughter, Katie, later said his final words were, "So much wasted time." A recorded conversation from before his death, aired later as part of a 2018 A&E documentary, told a different story than the one he'd given publicly months earlier. "There is no sign of me having dementia at this stage of my life," he said. "It was complete alcohol poisoning. And the fact is, I lied about my drinking." He went further still. "You know, I did it to myself, man. I did it to myself to cover up the sadness and the emptiness." Cassidy's will, once it surfaced, raised its own questions. Originally filed in Broward County back in 2004, the document explicitly cut out his daughter Katie, stating it was his specific intent not to provide any benefits to her or her descendants, and that language never changed, even though the two had reconciled enough that Katie was at his bedside when he died. Son Beau was named the primary beneficiary, while memorabilia went to his half-brothers. $150,000. That's roughly what the early reports put his estate at in assets, against debts reported around $187,000. 2 law firms later filed claims against the estate for unpaid legal bills. One for roughly $103,000, another for about $19,000, debts that had survived the dismissed bankruptcy case, and the estate's representative pushed back rather than paying them outright. But that wasn't the whole picture. Beau also inherited a retirement plan reportedly worth more than $450,000, plus a life insurance policy estimated around $1 million, which brought the real total closer to $1.5 million once everything was counted. Still a fraction of what Cassidy earned in his 20s, granted, but not the zero some headlines implied. Here's the twist that gives this whole story its weight. In October 2024, 7 years after Cassidy's death, the company Iconoclast acquired his music publishing catalog, his sound recordings, and the rights to his name, image, and likeness. And according to Music Business Worldwide, that deal was valued at more than $10 million. His son Beau called it a chance to keep his spirit alive. Think about what that means. The rights to David Cassidy's name and music, the very thing signed away from him as a teenager, the thing that generated hundreds of millions for other people while he collected a few $1,000s, the thing he sued Sony over and waited 4 decades to see resolved, finally produced a payout in the tens of millions. He just wasn't alive to see it happen. David Cassidy earned an estimated $8 million during the height of the Partridge Family, at a time when merchandise built on his name and face was generating roughly $500 million for the studio that owned the rights to it. A punishing tax structure, management fees, and the economics of an era when performers had almost no leverage over their own image ensured that even that $8 million figure was never fully his to keep. Bankruptcy followed in 2015, with debts and assets together reported as high as $10 million on the court paperwork. And when he died in 2017, his estate was initially valued at around $150,000, a figure that grew to roughly $1.5 million once life insurance and retirement accounts were factored in. The $10 million figure in this story isn't one clean number. It shows up in his bankruptcy filing, and it shows up again, almost mockingly, in the posthumous sale of the very catalogue rights taken from him at 19 years old. Zero assets isn't quite accurate either, since he left more behind than the first headlines suggested. But the larger pattern holds up against every fact we have. A fortune built on a teenager's contract. A fortune that mostly went to other people. A father's shadow he spent his whole life trying to outrun. 3 decades spent trying to rebuild what was lost. And a final reckoning that only arrived after he was gone. That's the financial story of David Cassidy. If this is your first video with us, here's the deal. Backstage Hollywood digs up what the official story leaves out. The fortunes, the contracts, the final reckonings, backed by court records and their own words, not rumor. David Cassidy isn't a one-off. It's a pattern across decades of Hollywood, and we're not done telling it. Subscribe, hit notifications, and drop a name in the comments you want us to dig into next. We read everyone. Some of our best episodes started right there.